All right, you know how much I love these circle and arrow diagrams. Here's our hypothetical food chain in this case, just to simplify our discussion of food webs. Here's our first trophic level with plants, our second trophic level with herbivores, and our third trophic level with predators. And I'm showing it here as the flow of energy going from one unit to the next. So as we start making our food webs, our food chains more complex into food webs, you might have something that looks like this, where we've added a second predator. And you can ask yourself, what is going to be the consequence of having two predators on an herbivore here? What does that actually look like? Is this potential competition? As you might expect, based on classical theory, or could other things be going on? This is where things get somewhat interesting, and it depends on the specifics of the interaction. Here's one possibility of how these interactions might actually play out, because predators feed generally on things that are about their same size or smaller. They tend to be generalists, so there's no reason to think that they would only feed on herbivores that are below them. If they can get their mouths around it, this looks like just as good a prey item as this one here. And so you can get an example of what is referred to as intra-guild predation. This is the guild of predators, things, organisms that make a living in roughly the same way. That's what a guild is. And therefore, if this predator feeds on this predator here, the outcomes for the herbivores is a bit unknown. Are they feeding mostly on this, and therefore this herbivore is completely released from predation? Or do they feed on both of them simultaneously, and therefore both of these decline? Or is it possible that there's a temporal effect where they feed on this one at first, they build up their populations, and then they feed on this one later? So anyway, this is an example of intra-guild predation here. Let me give you an example of intra-guild predation. Again, this is where a predator feeds on another predator. It's happening within the same guild. This is an example from the salt marshes that I spend a lot of time working on. The dominant predators in these systems are wolf spiders. Here you can see this wonderful Pardosa, this lycosid here, feeding on the main herbivores, these plant hoppers that can occur by the thousands on the dominant Spartina plant. There's this little egg predator here, Tithys vagus. It's a little myriad, and what it actually does is it runs up and down the stems looking for the eggs, which are of the plant hoppers, which are inserted inside of the leaf blade like this. The plant hopper will actually insert the egg kind of deep inside the blade, but Tithys actually has the ability to find it and pierce the egg through the leaf tissue. And these web-building spiders here, Graminota, these are linyphiids. They form these horizontal sheet webs, and basically as Proclesia bounces around, they often will fall to the ground, and if there's a web there, they're going to get caught and get eaten. So these are sit-and-wait predators, these are hunting spiders, and these are very active, mobile, scanning predators that are looking for those eggs. These are visual hunters, and this is going to become relevant. They're looking for motion, and when they see motion, they will jump on them. This is the dominant Spartina grass that we see, and there's another feature to this that will become relevant later on. And that is that the spiders actually like these really thatchy areas like this. They like habitat structure and habitat complexity, and this is where you tend to find most of the hunting spiders, most of those lycosids there. And in a very nice study by Debbie Finke, who is one of the co-authors of your textbook, and what she was interested in was looking at what happens when you have no predators versus a predator assemblage. Those are those three main predators that we were talking about. And actually, she focused mainly on two: the Tithys, the myriad egg predator, and the hunting spider. And what the consequences are for those systems for the herbivores, the plant hoppers, and for the plants themselves. So this was in a cage study that she did in the lab. And when you can see here, when there are no predators, there's lots of plant hoppers around. And when there's lots of plant hoppers around, the Spartina grows at about this level here. On the other hand, when you put predators in there, herbivore populations drop. That makes sense. The predators are doing their job. And the Spartina biomass actually increases. You have fewer predators. Example of a trophic release, trophic cascade there. But one of the things that she found was that this is dependent, this ability of herbivores to be really suppressed was dependent on whether you had that thatchy habitat there or not. No, present versus not present here. So when the environment looked like this, then the effect on the herbivores was stronger than when it looked more like this with very little thatch. So the question is, why is that? Why does thatch make a difference? And what she found was that the main cause of this has to do with that hunting mode of the spiders on the other predator itself, on the tithys. What you actually find is that the capture of Pardosa actually is much less when of the tithys is much less when there's thatch present than when it's actually absent. When it's a very simple habitat, when it's just the grass itself, these spiders actually have a much easier time seeing the other predators and feeding on them. They have a greater encounter rate and a greater capture rate. And what you actually find is that the prey tend to be more mobile and actually are more visible in the presence of these, in the absence of that thatchy habitat. And the more they move around, the more visible they actually become to the spiders. Turns out the plant hoppers are actually very sedentary. They very rarely move around. And as a consequence, they actually don't get encountered by the spiders all that much unless the spider actually lands, just bumps into them. So the encounter rates tend to be much greater for the tithys than they are for the herbivores themselves. And that makes these predators actually much more susceptible to predation than the herbivores. So this is an example of a predator feeding on another predator, and just to add a wrinkle to it, how habitat complexity actually mediates that particular interaction.